Welcome to Extracurricular. I am your co-host, Eddie Geller.
And I am your other co-host, Stephanie Vanos, school board member for Orange County Public Schools. But I'm here as I always am, unofficially.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
And it gets better every time, I think. Which is not to say that any of the times you've done it before, it's been subpar, but just like every time you're nailing it.
I appreciate it. How's my pep level today?
Your pep level is off the charts. Incredible amounts of pep. So appreciated. Welcome to the podcast. If you're new here, please do subscribe to the podcast. Rate us. Steph, what should they rate us?
5 stars only.
5 stars only. Also, we're on Instagram, extracurricular_podcast. If you want to email us, Steph loves reading your emails. It's podcastextracurricular@gmail.com. Do you think I covered everything in terms of people contacting us?
We're good to go.
Should I do your home address?
No, thank you.
Okay. Today we're going to be talking about your trip to Tallahassee, and you were doing some, what would you say, some lobbying, some listening, how would you describe it?
I would say that I was up with several other school board members from Orange County Public Schools and as well as our government affairs expert and communications. And we were just honestly having meetings with really different people in the Orange County delegation, just sharing some of the issues that our school district is facing, talking about how some of the proposed bills would impact us. And we also sat in on a couple of committee hearings.
I love it. So I think that's this is going to be a really interesting conversation, I think, for folks, both just like the lay of the land of education policy in Florida and where that's going, but also what it's like to go up as a school board member and to have these meetings and have these conversations and a little bit of insight into what that's like. But before we get to that, let's just talk about this week, another slow news week. Not much has happened. We're not going to spend today talking about Kristi Noem or Bovino or any of that, or the government shutdown. Though those things are all important, but we're going to keep it a little more local. You were at an Ice Out protest this week. Tell us a little bit what it was like here in Orlando, which, by the way, it is cold in Orlando. I just should note that, like us Floridians, we're struggling through it below freezing.
I know. Well, first I have to just speak on the cold. Speaking of ice, there was ice on the street, like literal ice, as in like frozen water on the sidewalks today when I was out running. I got out there. It was like 25, feels like 12. There was actual ice on the sidewalk.
Well, we need to get the temperatures up so we can abolish that ice. But tell us about
Such a troublemaker.
Tell us about the protest you were at.
Yeah. So so one of the schools in my district, some of the parents and students at one of the schools in my district wanted to just sort of exercise their First Amendment rights and, share their real concerns about what they've seen happening across the country, but also in Central Florida. There has definitely been an uptick of ICE presence in Central Florida. And so I guess, a student had asked his mother if she could organize, something for some students at the school if they, wanted to, again, just sort of protest what was happening. And so I drove back from Tallahassee and kind of was able to meet up with the group. And it was really, really inspiring, I would say, to see students out on the street with handmade signs, parents, these are just like everyday people with like strollers. There was a newborn out there all bundled up. Really, I would say like maybe not the group that you sometimes might think of when you think of like people protesting in the street. And yeah, students, they had chants that they were saying. I think it was something like, "We are mighty, we are small, we want you to free them all," or something like that, just referring to the innocent people that are, being held in detention centers across the nation. So I would say it was just really inspiring to see the community come together and just lots of support from people driving by. And again, this is just about, wanting to make sure that people's, constitutional rights are protected and that we are living the values that we espouse as Americans. And then just seeing people, of course, exercise their First Amendment right to, make their opinions known was really powerful.
Oh, I love that. And I think it's great to hear obviously we've talked about, and everyone is very well aware of the inspiring work by the folks in Minnesota to have each other's back, to support their community, to do what they can to protect each other from ISIS presence. But to see here in Orlando, Florida, these sorts of protests popping up, and I know they're across the country, that we've seen that people are really sick and tired of this administration and this agency acting unlawfully, egregiously, just terrorizing people. So I love that you made it out there. I'm sorry I couldn't join you. I was unfortunately working, click-clacking on my keyboard, making some videos as I do for work. But I'm so glad you went. Also, when you said there were handmade signs, for a moment my head was like Handmaid's Tale, because I feel like those people have dressed up like the handmaids from the Handmaid's Tale, to protest rightfully the rolling back of women's rights. But then I realized they are handmade, MADE. So
thank you for the clarification.
I want to spell it out literally and figuratively for the folks. I love that you went there. Okay. The other thing, another thing I want to talk about is, even though this was not in our state, I do think a lot of people probably are noticing this. A Democrat in Texas flipped a Republican state Senate seat that went for 17 points for Trump in 2024. And this guy, Taylor Remmett, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, defeated the incumbent Republican by a number of 57 to 43. So a gigantic swing to Democrats. And the reason I want to bring this up is not because it is gratifying to see, because it is gratifying to see. I'm happy to see this sort of swing, and we've seen other swings like this in special elections. Last year, of course, we did a podcast about it. But I think this is really important that we think about if indeed Democrats are going to come back into power nationally and hopefully among many states, and we would love to see it in Florida. But one thing I do want to think deeply about is the importance of candidate quality, the importance of primaries, because candidate quality really does matter. I think this crisis that we are in right now in this Trump administration is not only a crisis of a wannabe authoritarian in the White House and his enablers in the Senate and House of Representatives, but also Democrats who were not ready and still, I would say, not, standing up to fight hard and to meet this moment. So while I am gratified to see these sorts of election results, it does really matter when people say, we just have to get a Democrat elected. Like, yes, great, of course, but we really need folks who are in office, who are ready to fight, who are ready to be strategic, and to not be timid, and to ready, and especially in an era which, fingers crossed, we are, not to get too much ahead of ourselves, when we are going to be figuring out what to do in a post-Trump world, how we handle the abuses of this administration are going to be dependent on having elected officials who are willing to, unlike past Democratic administrations, to look back, to prosecute, to investigate. And I just think, and to not do the sort of look forward, not backward sort of thing. I just think it is so incredibly important. So I just, this special election made me think about that. And I just wanted to, articulate that.
I'm really just looking forward to electing people who are going to follow the law. That's my number one. That would be wonderful to have people who follow the law, who respect the law and respect the Constitution. And I think you're right. And I think we're lucky here in this area that we have a lot of representatives that both understand what the law is. Because honestly, being up in Tallahassee, you realize not all elected people, I think, fully understand what the law actually is. Mm-hmm. But then also, not being afraid to speak out and to speak up. And so I think it's both of those things.
Well, I mean, but when you say we need elected officials who are going to follow the law, like, yes, 100%. But when one party decides that they don't need to follow the law, there needs to be consequences for that. And I think when we've seen too much of the Democratic Party being like, okay, they acted bad or broke the law, but we just want to look forward. We want to look to the future. I mean, I think we are a big part of this mess is because we were unable to hold Trump accountable for January 6th, and he was more emboldened and came back stronger. And so now that's where we are.
Well, but I think there are legal mechanisms for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, no, for sure. But you have to have again, going back to what I'm saying is like you have to have candidates who are willing to do that, to not be timid and to be fighters and to, be strong in the face of, I mean, I think holding people accountable is scary, and doing those things are scary. And I think you are the exact kind of person I hope we elect more of. I mean, I'm a little bit in the bag for you, but also, I mean, I think you are unafraid to, you always follow the law, but you're unafraid to speak out even when, you talking about a banned book could, get you removed or what have you. I just think we need more. The elected officials that we're going to hopefully, knock on wood, sweep into office are people who are bold and unafraid.
I mean, I do want to say one thing, though. Talking about a banned book should not get me removed because it is perfectly legal to talk about a banned book. And every decision that I make is based under the law and has legal backing. So it is absolutely not a reason to remove anyone from office, absolutely to be not advocating for books and to be advocating that both our school boards, our school district, and our state board of education follow the law. I think that's actually what we should all be doing. I'm not asking anybody to break the law. That's not we cannot do that as constitutional officers, but we can require that the law be followed. And I think we all need to make sure that we are doing that.
Absolutely. But we are also in a time where maybe you're filming cops or maybe you're doing journalism like Don Lemon and you're getting arrested or, I hate to say it, getting murdered for doing stuff that is lawful. So, which is to say that you are following the law, but I think we are in a time where even if you're doing things that are lawful, but they stand out, there are consequences and sometimes those consequences are deadly. And I'm not asking for anyone who's elected to put their life on the line per se, but being lawful in these times can come with serious consequences.
So well said. So well said.
That ended up being a longer conversation than I thought it was going to be, but I'm glad we had it. Okay. Last thing I do want to touch on is, and we can talk about your trip to Tallahassee going from here, but there was an announcement that Ron DeSantis is going to he's going to have Florida avail himself of a tax credit that was passed in the big ugly bill, which essentially means more taxpayer-funded vouchers here in Florida. Can you talk about this for a moment?
Yeah, it's just access to more funds, more taxpayer money for taxpayer-funded vouchers. That's exactly what it is. So in Florida, we've had the Florida tax credit for over 20 years, and it's been a way for corporations to divert some of their taxes that would otherwise go into the general tax revenue. Oh, that sounds like I'm saying ravenous. I don't know. General taxes to divert them to go to pay essentially voucher schools. This was sort of the first step that Florida took before it passed the universal voucher bill. And I think they were sort of recognizing the constitutional questions to implementing a universal voucher system. Obviously, those constitutional concerns don't concern them too much anymore as they've gone completely around it. But having this Florida tax credit was sort of the first step that they took. And now we see the federal government taking that step too, where it's a way for, I believe it's both individuals and corporations to basically divert some of their tax funds into a system that would basically go to pay for voucher schools. And Florida has, I guess, as you say, opted into accepting these funds.
Boo is what I have to say.
I mean, it's just so predictable, but yes, I agree. It's out of control. And that has become more and more apparent, which I'm sure we will talk about later.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that momentarily. All right, so let's move into the kind of the heart of what I want to talk about. You took this trip to Tallahassee, which actually overlapped with your daughter also in Tallahassee to advocate against a new book ban bill. What was it like seeing your daughter up there in her 30 seconds advocating against this bill? And what was this bill?
So the bill was House Bill 1119. It is sponsored by Representative Bankson. And it basically attempts to make it easier to ban books in our public school libraries. It essentially removes a prong of the Miller test, which is just First Amendment law. And it basically says that a book, well, what Bankson is trying to say is that a book could be removed without considering the whole value of the book, the literary, social, political, artistic value of the book, which is it's just anti-First Amendment. I think this is going to face a lot of legal challenges if it does pass. I don't know that the Senate companion is moving along. I don't believe it is. So I'm not sure that this will become law. But in any event, my daughter was up there and with a couple of friends actually to former
Hope and Brady
that had been on the pod before. They were up there. They spoke out against it. All three of them did. They only had 30 seconds because there were so many people who were up to provide public comment on this bill. I think it was probably, 60, 70, 80 minutes. I'm not exactly sure of, but it was a long time of people commenting against this bill. The vast, vast majority were, opposed to the bill. So it was really cool to hear her. It was really cool to hear all the students, but it was really great to hear her just be so confident. And she, the reasoning that she gave was really well thought out. And I think she thought about her audience and she thought what would be most persuasive to them. And she was just talking about, how basically restricting students' access to books makes them less competitive because a lot of these books do come off of the AP list, the IB list. And so it makes our students less competitive. It gives them, less perspective than students in other states. And also it honestly delegitimizes education in Florida. When we're known for passing these book banning laws and we're known for our students not having access to, different works of literature, it delegitimizes the education system. So she spoke out on that, and I thought it was a great point.
It was very heartening to see all of the opposition speak against this bill, just person after person opposing this bill. But one thing I want to ask you as someone who listens to a lot of public comment, because all this opposition spoke and then the bill passed out of committee, correct? What is it? I'm curious the mindset of an elected official who listens to person after person after person after person oppose something and then to just pass it anyway. I mean, because watching it is heartening to see those people, but then it also sort of makes you think, why even go up and give testimony or make public comment if they're just going to be ignored? I'm curious what you think as someone who listens to public comment.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that you do have to think about is, I think it's frustrating to see.
Yeah.
But as someone who has voted on things where people have come up on public comment and taken an opposite position, there's also I know that I get lots of private comments behind the scenes for people who are afraid to go up there. But I will say this: when it comes to public education bills in Tallahassee, the charter industry, the private school industry, they just have so much more money behind them than public schools. And so what usually happens in these is that we're actually outnumbered a lot of times. And it can be hard for public education advocates to just have the funding and have the ability to get up there. Whereas, these groups, again, these like the charter industry and certain private school groups just have more funding. And so I actually find that they're up there more often, and they are often, leading in numbers in a lot of the public comment. So, again, I think some of the persuasive testimony was really about following the law. And there were some great questions in the bill too. Is this constitutional? I don't think the bill is constitutional, but, I think it's looking at the reasons why people are advocating for certain things and weighing those is critical.
So even though it is hard to watch, you do have to take into account and this may seem obvious, but the substance and for lack of a better term, the quality of what these comments are about. Because I've seen it in Orange County of, a dozen plus people advocate for banning a book that has, a couple of salacious pages in there. And you listen to person after person being like, ban this book. And, thankfully, I would say you have been on the right side every time of saying this book should stick around. So it's an interesting thing to watch, and I'm grateful for your insight into that.
Well, I also think it's making sure you're in touch with your community as well, because when you have community groups and there are, committees that are reviewing these books. So I know that we're getting a lot of input from those books and from members in our community. And then also, for other decisions, when you're actually out in the communities that are being impacted and you're talking to community members and students and teachers, that also, weighs into how you're making those decisions. The real concern I have is for elected people who are not really in their community. They're not really listening to the majority of people, and then they're making these decisions anyway.
Well, do you want to name names?
No names. Names.
Okay. All right. So I asked before the podcast, because I always want to ask permission, ask consent. I asked for you to give us some sort of takeaways from your trip to Tallahassee. So can you give us 3 takeaways of your trip to Tallahassee from your discussions with lawmakers? Like, what is going on for the state of education in Florida during this legislative session?
Yeah, I think, and we can talk about them as we go through. I think the first one was really that regardless of who we met with, there was broad recognition across party lines that the voucher program is out of control.
Mm-hmm. You mean the taxpayer-funded voucher program?
The taxpayer-funded voucher. Thank you for that that correction. That the taxpayer-funded voucher program really is out of control. And that was really whether we were meeting with Democrats or Republicans. And, I would say that wherever you fall on your core beliefs about the taxpayer-funded voucher program, I think any reasonable person would still believe that there needs to be transparency, that there needs to have guidelines to make sure that, the money is going at least where it's supposed to go, right? And then we can figure out whether it's right or wrong or good or bad or look at data and all that. But I think, it was brought up that, in this past year, 24-25, the state education budget had a $47 million shortfall because of the voucher program.
That's insane.
And the Department of Education had paid off vouchers, 23,000 vouchers to students whose status was unaccounted for. So they didn't actually know where they were. So I love these, like, the money follows the student. False. The money does not follow the student. But I will say I'm thankful for Senator Gates, who put forth a bill that is the bill perfect? No, but I think it does address some of the big concerns about the taxpayer-funded voucher program. And one of the things it does that I think is extremely important is it takes it basically puts the funding for the taxpayer-funded voucher program into a separate categorical, which means it's sort of, the money isn't coming directly out of, the way it works now is the voucher money goes into a district budget, though we never really see it, and then kind of gets pulled out. And what happens is that the voucher recipients get the full value of their per student funding, but the public school students, when that funding goes, then public school students are not fully funded, basically, if that makes sense. So this would kind of pull it out of the district budget, create a separate district for the taxpayer-funded voucher program, and it would at least enable districts to be able to budget a little bit better and would enable all of us to really see where the money's going.
But there is some opposition to this. Can you talk about that?
You are correct. So that has passed the Senate. The House has had a real issue with creating the separate categorical for the taxpayer-funded voucher program. In other words, they don't want to pull the money out separately. And in fact, there was one representative who, I don't remember exactly what she said, but she basically said that she was afraid that if it was put in a categorical, the funding would be in jeopardy, which is interesting given that last year they put the advanced studies funding in a categorical and promised that the funding would not be in jeopardy, even though we kind of know that when that happens, anyway, I'm getting funding in the weeds, but it was just interesting that she said that. So I'm curious to see if the House will agree to that. I think that's a really important piece of this bill. But it does have more cross-check, more verification to ensure that when students are getting the money, that they actually are where they are supposed to be.
Do you think these are real fixes? Do you think this is window dressing? I mean, this hasn't passed, so I know we're maybe getting a little ahead of ourselves, but is your sense that, like, okay, this is actually a real step in the right direction if this ends up passing?
Well, I mean, if you're someone who philosophically is opposed to using tax dollars to go to private schools that have no real accountability or transparency, then you're opposed to the taxpayer-funded voucher program. And that's philosophically where I am.
Yeah.
But I recognize that we are in a state that I don't see it going away tomorrow. I mean, and I will say this voucher program did not happen in a day.
Yeah.
If people were paying attention, I mean, it's been happening over 20 years. It's slowly but surely been created over time. So I don't think it is going to come down in a day. But I think this is an important way to be able to better track where money is going, where students are going. And I think it will, I'm also hopeful that we can better measure outcomes, because I think once people see the outcomes of where students are going, there will be a lot less, support for this taxpayer-funded voucher program. I received an email from someone a couple of days ago, and this person, was concerned about, what I think he perceived as a tax on parents who choose to participate in the taxpayer-funded voucher program. And so I just want to be clear. I've said this before on this podcast. I've said it before in public groups where I've spoken on this topic. I do not blame any individual person for taking part in the voucher program. I mean, the Florida legislature puts this money out there for you to take. Mm-hmm. And if you want to go to a private school, why would you not take it?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense that a parent would take it. So and honestly, I don't really even blame the private schools for taking the money or for lobbying to get the money, because if I were, a private school, that's probably what I would do. I would want to have the money too. But I do blame the lawmakers who allowed this to happen. I do blame the lawmakers who are not protecting our taxpayer funds and have created a system that has absolutely no accountability, very little transparency, no responsibility, no guardrails, nothing. They've created this program. It's on them. It's on every lawmaker who voted yes for universal vouchers. That's where I think the blame lies. It does not lie with an individual parent. And I don't think it lies with the school that takes advantage of the money.
Period.
That's what the kids say.
That's what the kids say. No, that was great. And thank you for articulating that. Okay, let's go to another takeaway from your trip to Tallahassee. Hit me. Not literally. I mean, you can if you want, but maybe not in the face.
Well, I can't reach across the table, and I wouldn't anyway.
Thank you.
I'm going to phrase it this way. I'm really thankful for the representatives and senators who met with the school board members. So that was Representative Escamani, Young, Harris, Lopez, Bankson, Booth, and then Senator Bracy Davis, Senator Smith, and Senator Trunow. So I want to just extend my gratitude for them for taking time. Time is a commodity, especially up in Tallahassee, where people are rushing between committee hearings and meetings. And so I really appreciate all of them for taking the time to meet with school board members. Not everyone in our delegation did. And so I'm grateful for the ones that did. And I would also say, that we may not agree on everything with all of the members in our delegation, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things that we do agree on. And one thing one of the hearings that I actually went to and actually spoke in was one on the e-bike, and it was actually an e-bike bill. It's Senate Bill 382. Was the sponsor is Senator Trunow. And, it was sitting in that committee and hearing, people on, all sides of the aisle having, I would say, a really thoughtful and nuanced conversation on e-bikes, like where they recognize the benefits of micro mobility, but also the dangers it poses for our children and for our seniors and for our community, and really some of the really horrific injuries that our local hospitals have seen. I really appreciated that conversation. And it was like, oh yeah, this is kind of what you should be doing. Having like thoughtful, I would say, nonpartisan, I don't know if that's the right word, not political, just a conversation about an important issue, especially in our community. And so appreciate Senator Trunow for putting forth that bill. I spoke during it. I requested that the task force that he suggests in the bill, that they include someone from the education world, whether that's an education safety specialist or school board member, superintendent, something like that, requested that they be on the task force. And I will say that we received immediate feedback on that request, which I really, really appreciate. So I would say that's the second thing, is just really thankful for elected people who, again, made the time to talk with us, even if they recognize that we are not going to agree on everything. And then also that there are still some issues that we're able to talk about in a way that just doesn't include politics.
That is great to hear, and that is heartening. By the way, do you think I could get on that advisory committee? I had a GoPed. I'm curious if anyone listening to this podcast will know what this was. This was when I was around 13 years old. So maybe this is, somewhere in the late 90s. It was like an electric scooter, but it was gas powered. I don't know if they still sell them, but anyway, it went like way too fast, was very dangerous, and was so fun.
Well, I don't know, but it was funny. The bill itself, I know this is a joke, but this is actually now a serious answer. Just leave it to me. I'll make everything unfun. You try to be funny and I'll bring it right back to something that's unfunny and real. No, so it's interesting because in conversation about this bill, it references e-bikes, but doesn't say anything about e-scooters. And people brought up that concern that, well, we shouldn't be including e-scooters in this. And I guess the response was that they have to find a way to describe e-scooters in a way that doesn't pull in scooters that people with disabilities are using to get around. So I just thought that was
so it's like DEI for scooters, like we
can't say DEI in the state anymore.
Okay, I'm sorry. We'll edit that out. Okay, but I actually have a somewhat serious observation about this. It is wild because you were making me think of it when you talked about this sort of nonpartisan lens that is going into the safety of e-bikes and e-scooters. And just a couple weeks ago, we had on Linda Coffin, who talked about gun safety and the safety for kids in our schools, and how heartbreaking it is that because that is so politicized, it is outside the bounds of regular conversation. But again, I'm not breaking any news here. I mean, guns are so goddamn dangerous and so deadly, but we can't have a conversation about their actual safety without getting into this thing about, well, we have a right to own guns and we should be able to carry them everywhere. Like, it's wild that when we have a safety issue that is depoliticized, we can actually use our entire brains. And then when we get to guns, it's all lizard brain, my rights, my guns. And just think, if you just think about a gun in a public safety measure, I always think of guns, and I didn't say it articulate in this way in our episode, but they're just handheld killing machines, right? They're like this thing that's not too much bigger than your phone if you have a handgun that you can just pull a trigger and end someone's life or horribly injure someone. What an incredibly dangerous public item that almost anyone can get a hold of, and especially in the state of Florida. So I'm not sorry for going on this tangent, but it's heartbreaking because we do have this ability to understand public safety issues and to address them in thoughtful manners, except not guns.
Yeah, I think it just speaks to that point of if we can just keep politics out of it and just let common sense prevail, we can really get a lot done. So yeah. I'll just leave it on that hopeful note.
Well, I appreciate that hopeful note, but I know obviously anyone who's listening to this podcast knows how you feel, but it's worth it. It's so frustrating. Okay. All right. So that is 2 takeaways. Do you have a third takeaway for us? Because rule of threes.
Rule of threes. I would say the third one. So another, headline in the news lately has been about the Schools of Hope. And there was a Department of Education online meeting on Monday that I logged down to. So I listened to it, and they were...
Is this the state or the national?
This is the state Department of Education, because of Schools of Hope, South Florida. And they were supposed to sort of talk about proposed rule changes and allow people to ask questions. And it was about the most frustrating meeting that I have ever been a part of.
That says something, because you've been a part of a lot of meetings. And I've heard about how frustrating some of those meetings are.
I just like an efficient meeting. Who doesn't like an efficient meeting?
Sure. Do you want to name names?
I'm not going to name names, but you know who you are. I'm kidding.
She's not kidding.
We couldn't hear any questions submitted. So it was like they were submitted privately. So we couldn't see questions other people were submitting. And then every so often this person would come on, the mic and just say, oh, this question about such and such was submitted. Yes, we are taking that into consideration.
Oh my
or
God.
like, yes, we have heard that before. We are taking that into consideration. So, I wasted an hour of my life on this call. Nothing was done. And so then it was said, well, the proposed rule will be online by the end of the week. So sure enough, the proposed rule was put online later this week. And I think there are some tweaks to the law to the rule. So just for clarification, so there's a law that sort of establishes the schools of hope. This was the law that was passed last minute with the budget bill back in June, kind of flew under the radar, put in at the last minute. And then the law directs the Florida Department of Education to create the rules that kind of outline how it will work in practice. So there are two ways to revise. You could either, revise the law with the legislature, or you could revise the rule with the Department of Education. And so the path that is happening right now is the rule is being revised without a change in the law. I'm not exactly sure. I think there might be parts of the rule that now might be inconsistent with the law. So I'm not sure whether the law will also have to change or how that will work, but something to keep an eye on. Sorry, I had to get a little technical there because I think, people, there's laws and there's rules, and the rules are usually the way that the state sort of explains in greater detail and carries out the laws. So there are some changes, and there are some changes that, that school districts requested with Schools of Hope. I think there's an acceptance that the School of Hope law that will not be repealed this year. There are some bills out there to repeal it. I don't think that's the direction the legislature is going to go. So we're sort of in the position of having to take what we can get. The rule does change some issues that people have raised. I don't think it goes far enough. I still have real concerns. I think one of the proposals that the Orange County School Board had suggested, which I think would be really beneficial, is just to limit this. If we're going to have this program, just limit it in every way to a school that is either a D or an F. Mm-hmm. So whether you're going to target a school or whether you're going to co-locate in a school, only D or F schools for either of those. I think it makes it clearer. I think it makes it, it prevents sort of changing the definition of what a quote low performing school is. I hate the term low performing school. I don't think it's accurate.
Well, you call me a low performing boyfriend all the time.
Never. So anyway, all that to say, I think there were some easy tweaks they could have made that were not made. Mm-hmm. But it does appear that there will be some cost sharing with the districts in the event of co-location. There's some guidelines about capacity now that I think are positive. All in all, I really don't know how you rehabilitate this law, but we'll see what happens. I think the most interesting part about this is that the meeting in which the Board of Education will talk about these changes, which will happen later this month, is, guess where it is, Eddie? A very, very convenient place for all Floridians to attend.
Okay, so somewhere obviously in the center of the state with lots of access from any point. So Ocala, I don't know.
Key West.
Oh my God.
So I don't know if it could have been any farther, but so this meeting will be happening in Key West, Florida.
I mean, that's insane. They're so clearly showing that they know how unpopular this law is and how little they want to be held accountable. They're holding a public meeting that affects all students and parents and
school districts
in the state of Florida, and they're holding it in, pardon my language, Key fucking West, which I've been to Key West a couple of times. It's lovely, but it is a pain in the ass to get there. We should go to Key West sometime, maybe not related to the school board.
Or maybe we will.
What contempt they have for the folks in this state to hold their meeting in Key West and to not want to be held accountable and to not want for folks to be able to have input on what they're doing. And I think this is emblematic of how this state has been run for as long as I can remember. Now, granted, I have a short memory. You and I have a lot of discussions about that, but it's so contemptuous. Both I have contempt for them and they have contempt for us, but I'm not the State Board of Education.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier is just, if you truly, and again, I mean, I guess the difference is if you're an elected, person, you are representing people and people deserve to be able to share their opinions with you, whether they agree with you or don't. And you should be in the community. You should be trying to understand what your community wants and doesn't want. In the case of the State Board of Education, of course, they're not elected.
Yeah.
And so, to them, and that's, I think, what's really dangerous about this state board is they're really not held accountable.
Yeah.
By, anyone other than the governor.
Yeah.
Which is scary, which they can get away with a lot. And then when they take that piece of just public participation out of it, I don't even have the word. It's disappointing. It's concerning. It's sad. I will say, there's a pretty amazing school board member, though, in Monroe County, and I know she'll be at the meeting, and hopefully she'll get a group of people to speak as well. So shout out to Sue, who I know will be there.
I love it. Okay, I've got a couple of final questions from your trip to Tallahassee, and thank you for putting together those takeaways. I'm curious what, you talked about how you appreciate folks from the other side of the aisle, even though you're, you are nonpartisan, but you go in to have conversations with folks who definitely disagree with you on a lot of issues. Like, what is that like? Can you talk about that sort of broadly?
Yeah, I mean, I said this a lot during my campaign. I really actually think there is a lot that we can agree on. And I think we, especially when you are building relationships or you have limited time to have conversations, I think you start from things that you have in common. And I mean, let's say I'll use taxpayer-funded voucher program as an example. Now, there may be, and there are some legislators in Orange County who strongly support and who voted for taxpayer-funded vouchers, HB1. Mm-hmm. I just don't agree with them about that, right? Yeah. But I think we can all agree that there should be more transparency for taxpayer funds, right? There should be more transparency to see where taxpayer money is going. I'm not saying every person believes that, but I'm saying that I think the people in Orange County that I have talked with do believe that there should be fiscal transparency. And then that's just honestly a fiscally conservative, that's a tenet of fiscal conservatism. Did I say that right?
I think you got it.
You know what I'm saying. So I think we can talk about that. I mean, I think there are other members who do have a background in school board, or they do have a background in education. So I just think the bottom line of having the conversations is just to find something that you have in common and to start there. And I think as you build relationships, you can have more, I think you can have deeper conversations about philosophical differences. And it's not to say that you can't, you just accept what they say. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was a conversation I had where one of the representatives was sort of, stating that, their belief that, taxpayer-funded vouchers, well, the money goes to the parents and the parents pay the school, so it's not really public funds. And it was kind of, like, no, it's still taxpayer money. And I think we can all agree that transparency is important. So, I think it's kind of focusing on broad things that you can move forward on, because honestly, that's what everyday people want. They just want they want movement forward. And we have to do that. And sometimes it means that we have to have really good conversations with people who don't agree with us on everything.
There you go. Here's my final question for you. Being up in Tallahassee, and you've gone a number of times and you've been an advocate before you were elected, is there part of you that just knowing how these laws take shape and how much they affect education around the state, is there part of you, and we're not breaking any news here, but is there part of you that thinks like, oh, maybe I should be in a role that is in Tallahassee, whether that's a representative or senator or something like that?
Honestly, right now, no. Mm-hmm. I don't think so. I think it's really tough. I think it's really tough for anyone up in Tallahassee right now. I think it's really tough if you're on the Democratic side, because you just have so little power to really do anything or to really pass big bills that probably are most meaningful to you. It's not to say that there aren't bills you can't pass, because our representatives and senators have shown us that there are. There was the the anaphylaxis bill that was passed last year, which I know is hugely important to students and to people and our community members, that I believe it was Senator Smith and Rep. Harris sponsored and passed. So it's not to say that you can't pass legislation, but I think it's really hard to pass really meaningful legislation right now if you're a Democrat. And if you're a Republican, I don't think it's easy for anyone. I think there are Republicans up there who have their own ideas about things, but feel a little squelched by the people who are in power.
Yeah. And
so I'll just say, obviously, Republicans overall have more power up in Tallahassee right now for obvious reasons. They have the numbers, they have the majority, they have the ear of the leaders. But I don't think it's easy for anybody right now. And honestly, I think it's really important to have strong representation at the local level, because that's, we feel a lot of the decisions made are made at the local level. And so I think it's extremely important to have, good representation on school boards and county commissions and city commissions. So I think it's important.
That makes sense. I will say we are having this conversation just a few days after your friend Jennifer Jenkins dropped out of the Florida Senate race. So now, and Colonel Vindman has jumped in, raised $1.7 million. But in my mind, I think, well, there's a slot for you, my darling, to step up and run for U.S. Senator for Florida. What are you thinking?
I am in the most important role right now. I believe that. The education of our children is everything. I think what's happening...
I thought you were going to say being my partner. Oh. All right.
Honestly, I think what's happening to education is scary. It's concerning. And I think we need strong people who are willing to stand up and who are willing to say, nope, that's not the law. I don't accept that. No, I'm not taking it.
I love it. I love it. So that's a maybe.
That's a no.
Okay.
But thank you.
Of course. All right. I made you talk a lot this episode. This is about your trip. Do you have any questions for me? I did not go to Tallahassee, but I always want you to feel like this is a place for you to ask me any questions you might have.
Let's have an update on the goal scoring.
Okay. I was not prepared to ask this question. I will say in my game last week, I had a goal and assist, but I had 2 goals that were disallowed for reasons that are just like the ref didn't see what actually happened. And so even though I put the puck in the net past the goalie, the goals were not allowed. And actually, maybe I should go to Tallahassee and talk about the lack of referee quality in beer league hockey and how that is affecting people. I and the other beer leaguers pay a lot of money to play in these games. And if our statistics are not being accurately counted, you talk about accounting for the voucher system. What about accounting for goals and assists in beer league hockey games? Is this not important? Do people not care? That's all I'm saying.
Hey, I have seen less impactful bills being passed and going through the legislature. So I say go for it. Okay, can you leave us with, let's just do one more. Can you leave us with any recommendations, any movies people need to see before the Oscars that are on the list?
Okay, well, I'm on the record. Well, no, I'm not on the record in this podcast, but I'm on the record in real life loving F1, which was nominated for an Oscar. And there are going to be folks, and we've also seen some of the other Oscar contenders, One Battle After Another and Hamnet, and those movies are all well and good. But I have a real respect for the technical craft that went into a movie about F1 driving, a sport that I have no interest in. But I really enjoyed it. I saw it in IMAX. I bought the 4K and I've watched it at home with my speakers. It sounds great. So I think F1 is a really fun movie. I'm still waiting for us to watch Train Dreams. Oh, and I called you out last time about K-Pop Demon Hunters, which also is an Oscar nominee. We still have not watched it. Did you watch the rest of K-Pop Demon Hunters?
No, we need to watch it today.
Well, okay. All right. Yeah. What was your favorite movie of 2025 so far?
I did enjoy F1. I thought it was really good. It brought back, like feel good moments of the 80s and 90s for some reason for me. So I liked that. But I would say One Battle After Another was my favorite on the list.
Yeah.
That was a really good one. I really like that one.
You really loved it. And I enjoyed it as well. Okay. We're at the end of our time. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast this week, Stephanie. Your insight, always invaluable. So thank you so much.
So glad I could make it.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.